What's up, everybody? We have a special show for you today. I know you've probably been getting sick. You haven't told me. Thanks for being kind. But you've been sick and tired of hearing from me week after week. It's been the summer months have been hard to get guests on. So many people traveling and are so busy. I understand that 100%. We've been busy as well. But I did make a promise to keep this thing up and going. And we are almost to the fall, so it should get better. But today you do have a special guest with us today. His name is Ken Wilson. You're going to love his story. I've known him for the last 5 years or so. I have known him as the happy-go-lucky, Jesus-loving dude. I didn't know where he came from. I didn't know his backstory. I knew he was an author. And we're going to dive into all that today. His story is so fascinating. And wait till the very end because we have breaking news on what's going on in Ken's world. But you got to stick around to the end to find it. All that and more is happening right after this. Welcome back to the When Words Don't Come Easy podcast. I am Andy Howard. If you have not joined the program before, I'm so glad you're here. I am very excited today. I have a dear friend of mine, a fellow co-author. Man, I've known him for years, and I told him, we just bumped into each other at an event a couple weeks back, and I told him, you have to come on the podcast to talk about your book. In fact, we're going to spend a lot of time on his first book that he wrote, but stick around to the end because there is a brand new surprise coming out as well. We will dive into that. But first, without further ado, I do want to bring on my dear friend, Ken Wilson. What's up, Ken?
What's up, Andy? How you doing out there in beautiful hot Texas?
Man, my face is melting off. Literally. It's like, if you want to get a comparison to what it feels like, I'm sure you know, you've been through Texas many times, but it's kind of like having your oven ready for dinner and then just go open the oven, let it slap you around for a few minutes.
It's a dry heat, Andy. It's a dry heat, right? Come on.
Yeah, well, for sure. Well, anyways, how are you, man? Today you're actually in beautiful Georgia area, but you're from Florida. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. Florida, we came up here and now we're spending time in the mountains to escape the heat.
Good. Well, good for you, man. Well, I'm excited to dive into this project that you did, but before we do, I want to go back a little bit. And first, I know you're a husband. I know you're a dad. Tell me a little bit about your family and just a little bit about who Ken is.
Well, you know what? First off, I want to say thank you for writing your book and sharing your story, Andy, too, and kicking off these amazing podcasts and breathing hope into people, too. I mean, it's awesome. And I just want to say again, I appreciate the opportunity here to share my spiritual journey and my story of writing a book. So let me start out by saying this. Anything is possible.
Yeah.
Anything is possible with God.
Amen.
Because, you know, seriously, what you and the audience are basically going to hear today from me and my upbringing to where I am now in my life, it's just nothing more than a miracle. And I'm super pumped to share it with you all right now. So, yeah, I've been married for almost 30 years. And I've got 2 kids, a 22-year-old boy who just graduated from Florida State and a 19-year-old daughter who's playing soccer going into her junior year at Southern Miss University.
Wow.
So we're keeping really busy. So what I wanted to do, too, is I wanted to share a little background on me to kind of set the stage for my story and my spiritual journey. So I just wanted to start off by saying, you know, kind of where I grew up, too, because I think this is going to be it's going to be pretty amazing to see how I grew up and where I am today. So I grew up in the cornfields of Illinois, near a small town called Joliet, Illinois. I don't know if you know Joliet. It's where the Blues Brothers was filmed. Saturday Night Live days back in the 1980s. And it was basically a tough part of town, Andy. I mean, prisons, correctional centers. It was like the other side of the tracks. I mean, my older brother and I, you know, we were from a blue-collar family, middle-income family, and we had good, strong values, a strong work ethic. And we were initially brought up attending church. But when my mom passed away when I was 5 years old, those days of attending church basically came to, I mean, it was just like a screeching halt. I mean, my dad, I believe what happened to Andy is I think my dad he kind of threw in the towel on religion and God altogether. I mean, we just flat out stopped going.
Yeah.
So early on in my life, which, as you know, with kids too, it's a critical period, critical stage. And I really didn't have that, that understanding or foundation of who Jesus is and what he did for us. I mean, Christmas to us was Santa Claus, presents under the tree, and his big old, hairy bunny hopping around, just throwing Easter eggs all over the place. So,
wow, man,
yeah.
thank you for sharing that, Ken. I've known you, I would say 5 or 6 years maybe now. It's hard
Yep.
to tell when I first met you, but I never knew this side about you. So one, I'm grateful for you sharing that. And because here's the Ken I know. And so this is wild going back to the heartbreak and some of your upbringing, but the Ken I know has the biggest smile on his face all the time. And I even told Tiff recently, I'm like, that dude is like the epitome of a Christ follower. I've never seen, and I'm sure you have bad days, man. We all
Thanks.
do, right? But
Yep.
I've never seen you have a bad day. It's like you're so consistent every time. You're just always happy and beaming. And I love that about you. But tell
Appreciate
me
that.
more about, losing your mom at such a young age. And then you
Yeah.
guys kind of got out of church. Sounds like, when did things change for you?
Yeah. So, fast forward to when I was about 8 years old and my dad got remarried. And then after 5 years together, they just went through a difficult divorce when I was about 13 years old.
Mm.
And my brother, dad, and I ended up living in some pretty harsh conditions. One of them was, I remember, a one-bedroom apartment. I mean, we're just eating spam, hot dogs with Arby's sauce, for like a year. I mean, it was,
Man.
and some other lower income family homes
Yeah.
too. Times were tough. And, the thing about it too is my dad was a tough dude. He was like Clint Eastwood, he'd be like, Kenny, you better do the dishes or else. He was like this tough dude that I mean, we were afraid of him,
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
But looking back, I realized my dad was battling depression.
Yeah.
It was a big thing for him to lose, the love of his life at such an early age. She was 31 years old when she passed. So when I sit down with my dad today, he always tells me, how sorry he is for how he grew up and you kids had it rough. And, I always tell my dad, listen, my childhood was fine, because going through those difficult situations helped shape me into who I am today and to be
Yeah.
grateful for everything I have now. So, but again, Andy, there was just like no glimmer of God or Jesus in my life. I mean,
Yeah.
it still wasn't there. But as you know, God's patient, right? He's
Yeah.
constantly working on his time. So,
Well, that is very amazing. And I don't mean that it's a very tough story, but a very amazing story. When
well,
you went through that and when you're going through that, and then when did you come back to Christ, or when did your relationship with Christ rekindle?
yeah. So we're going to fast forward here too. I mean, when I was 29 years old,
Yeah.
and now 29 years old, I'm 2 years married
Yeah.
to Paige. And, God and Jesus, they were still kind of absent from my life. I mean, we went to church. I
Yeah.
felt like I was basically like checking off the box. He's
Yeah.
a good guy. He's a good boy. He's doing the right things. But, God's always working his plan. He was kind of slowly nudging me, so it was kind of a
Yeah.
drip on his time. And then this turning point came, basically what I call the wake up call here when I was 31 years old. I was healthy, full of life the previous day. And then boom, boom out of nowhere. I spiked the fever. My gut started killing me. So,
Oh,
my wife, Paige, rushed me to the hospital. And basically, we found out that, I needed to get my appendix out.
wow.
And I said, listen, doc, do whatever you need to do to get it all out. But 3 days after surgery, still on my back in the hospital bed there, I wasn't getting any better.
Wow.
And I was actually going through what they call anaphylactic shock. So, I mean, they seriously had me sign my last will
Oh my
right in
goodness.
front of Paige. Okay. And then they they wheeled me down to the operating room again, opened me up, got what they needed out of me, mopped me down, stitched me back up, and they basically gave me like a 50-50 chance of,
Oh my goodness.
seriously, this is at 31 years old. And the weird thing too, Andy, is, my mom was 31 years
Just
old.
what I was thinking when you said that. Wow.
Yeah.
So here you are at 31. See, this
Mhm.
is so many flashbacks for me. About 6 months ago, Peyton, her appendix
Yeah.
burst, and actually they were trying to prevent that from happening. They didn't want to do this. It was just so complicated. They didn't want to do the surgery originally, because she was so sick and they didn't know that her lungs would hold up to going under the anesthesia for the surgery. Well,
Right.
then her appendix burst after all, and they didn't want to do the surgery because they just were like, well, this is basically too late. There's nothing we can do. The whole procedure would have been to remove it anyway. Well, now it's already burst, but they did have to go in and try to get as much of, I guess, the fluid, for lack of better word, whatever, the
Exactly.
poison out of her. And then they came in, and I'm so grateful for doctors. Please hear my heart. They've been lifesavers to us, but they don't always have the bedside manner. I think they get so book smart that they forget they're dealing with humans sometimes. And so I'll never forget, the doctor just walked into Tiff and I, and she's just like, what do you guys want us to do if our heart stops? You know, and we're like, what do you mean? What do you want us to do? Just, we want you to save our daughter's life, you know? So, and she's like, I just have to ask all that. And it was just, she was very black and white, just asking filling out the form and all the questions. So anyways, you're 31 years old now. You're told you basically have a 50-50 chance. Obviously, I've heard the rest of the story because I've got to meet you recently. But what happened from there? Was it a slow recovery, or did it happen pretty quick? What happened there?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I mean, so after that second surgery, while I'm in ICU with the beeping machines, I got these tubes in my mouth. I'll just never forget the moment when my family walked into the room, Paige and my dad and stepmom, and they just reached out and held my hand.
Yeah.
And then, just all of a sudden, I felt this like just a complete peace, and just this calmness. I mean, it's just hard to describe. And, when I looked up in front of me, hanging on the wall above my bed was Jesus on the cross.
Wow.
It's just so vivid,
Yeah.
And now, again, at this point, Andy, in my life, I mean, I was still not a praying man,
Yeah.
But for whatever reason at that time, I prayed to God to get me through this.
Yeah.
I'm just like, hey, I'm not done in this world. What have I done with my time here? You really start to get these flashbacks, like, so what's my legacy? What do I accomplish with this short amount of time that I've been here with? So, I wanted to have kids. I just had a lot more to do on earth. And I was basically saying, hey, if you get me through, I'm going to follow through.
Yeah.
And amazingly enough, and I know that Paige and family, I mean, they were praying a lot.
Yeah.
And the next day, I made a turn for the better. It was like an invitation he gave me. He goes, here, take this, take it. Now go out and do something with it. Do something amazing. So, it's wild when you're at rock bottom.
Yeah.
And desperate in your life. That kind of seems like when we need God the most.
Amen.
And, seriously. And boy, going through everything that I've gone through in my life here, I figured out that we need God all the time.
Yes.
We need him the good, the bad. And, when you listen and trust him, Andy, I mean, he's going to take those valleys and those struggles and turn them into good, like he did with me. And as you'll soon see, as I kind of share a little bit more about the book and everything.
Yeah. I mean, that's so good. And it's so true. And I've been sharing this a lot lately. I feel like, obviously, this is why God brought you on here. I'm loving this conversation. But I've been sharing this a lot. There's a lot of business partners, even a lot of just friends that aren't even in our business. A lot of people I know this day and age, it's a hard time right now. There's a lot, finances, there's stress, work is not easy to find. And then just a lot of different things. We thought 2020 was bad just from the COVID side of it, but then the after effects of 2020, there's just been so many different things. So, but what I've been telling people in my life, and it sounds like in your life as well, that it was those hardest times in my life where I learned the most. It's like, I wish I could say that it's always the mountaintops where you learn so much, but no, it's those valleys, man. It's those hard times where you have to lean on someone stronger than yourself, honestly, to get through, is when I've always learned the most. And it sounds the same for you. Like that was a huge turning point for your life. So I do want to dive in for the next few minutes into this book I have in my hand. And if you have anything else you want to share, I don't want to cut you off to wrap up where you were going with your story. But this book right here, it's called The Bible Simplified. Author is, I'm going to put it up close to the camera, Ken Wilson. Dude, first of all, congratulations. I know how hard it is to write a book. And sometimes I know the hardest part is just getting started. But I would love to hear a little bit about what you thought about the whole writing process. And first of all, who's this book for? I know the answer. It's an easy one. It's for everybody. But who is it for, and who do you write it for? And then tell me just a little bit about the writing process of it.
Yeah, so I'll give you kind of a background of how I got inspired to do this. So 5 years ago, when I was 50 years old, I know you're like, Ken, you don't look like you're 50, right?
You're not a day over 21, man.
Yeah. No, we moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and we stumbled across this church out there where we became friends with the pastor. And great thing about Pastor Nathan is he used to weave like everyday life into the stories of the Bible.
Yeah.
So he made it interesting, and I never really experienced anything like that before. So he made church exciting for me for the first time.
That's awesome.
It was one of those sermons where you just like, I better, honey, let's go, kids. We can't miss the sermon,
Yeah.
So it was just, he had you on the edge of the seat. And, within a few months, Pastor Nathan approached my wife and me, and he says, "Hey, Ken Page, why don't you guys attend a Bible study class? And I'm leading it." And I'm like, okay, Andy, I've never gone to a Bible study class. Okay. So I'm like, you know, how do you say no to a pastor? Right. So I said, oh, yeah, sure. Even though, I mean, seriously, at this point in my life, I still never read the Bible.
Yeah.
I was spiritually immature.
Yeah.
Wow. I'll be uncomfortable hanging out with all these like Bible scholars, right?
Yeah.
And what if he had me get in front of them and start praying, right? I mean, I was afraid of how I was going to look, what I'm going to say, what are they going to think of me? So, if a person at church, Andy, would have came up to me, just a regular person, I would have probably said, oh, yeah, we might be there. No, thank you. But God, again, this is one of those God things, right? And if you start to be a little bit more aware of what's going on in your life, you'll start to connect the dots of how these people come into your life. But God puts the most important person in front of me to ask that question.
Yeah.
So that was the difference. I mean, God knew I wasn't going to say no, So getting into the book here, so we started attending these Bible studies, and then we started to connect with the people in the group. I learned from them. We became good friends with them. And the thing is we jumped in uncomfortably. So if I'm going to tell somebody to do something here, this is a big thing in life, right? Is stepping up.
That applies across the board right there, Ken. That is so good, man.
Absolutely. You got to be uncomfortable, right? That's the only way you're going to change. That's the only way you're going to grow.
Yeah.
So you got to be scared. And, so I got so intrigued with the stories of the Bible that during COVID of all times, right? Instead of sitting on the couch and, wallowing about how bad my life is, I used that pause in my life to finally pick up the Bible.
Wow.
I mean, I just said, I'm going to intentionally read the Bible this time. I mean, I've picked it up before and I'm like, So, there's a difference between interested in reading the Bible, right? And then I said, I'm going to commit to finishing it. And, not only was I reading it, I started taking detailed notes on each page. I started to highlight a lot of the verses that really stood out to me. And when I was done, I took those notes and Bible verses that I typed up in a Word doc. And I created a little mini Bible book that I printed up at Walgreens. I mean, this is it right here, right?
Wow.
So, because I started to see what God was doing in my life, and I wanted to start building that solid faith-based foundation in our kids' life that I didn't have.
Yeah.
So.
And that's so cool. And you used a buzzword that jumped out at me because it's one of my favorite words. You said intentional. You started reading the Bible intentionally. And that goes across the board as well with anything you want to do in life, whether it's you want your marriage to get better, you want to be better at your job and get raises or promotions, you want to be a better parent. Nothing happens by accident, in other words, but you have to be intentional about, okay, it's one thing to say, I'm going to read the Bible, but then read it intentionally. Huge difference. I love this, what you've done, and you'll probably dive into that next, but you've kind of taken each chapter and you broke it down into bite-sized pieces. It's not overwhelming. It's very clean too. This is going to sound very nerdy, but I love the clean fonts. It doesn't look overwhelming. Like if a book is too small and too many words and not enough pictures in the font, I just get overwhelmed with it. I'm like, oh, that looks complicated. I want to walk myself out of the book before I even dive into it. But this is a very easy read, very clean. Tell us more about the book. So after you dove into reading the Word, when did you get the idea about, you already did that, I forget what you called it, that chart, I guess, for your personal family. But when did it come to mind, hey, I need to take this to others?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, because right off the bat, you're like, oh, this is all about, that's kind of selfish for me to say, hey, it's all about my family, right? This is for our kids and everything. And I soon realized this is another God thing. I mean, I soon realized that this is much bigger than just our kids, right? I'm
Wow.
sure there's just a lot of other people out there who've been wanting to read the Bible too, but they just haven't found the time to do it because it's long, it's complicated, it's confusing. 66 books, 1,200 pages, and you try reading through Chronicles and all that genealogy, right? That's exciting information. So I just started, I don't know how you felt when you were writing your book, but I started to get this incredible energy. I mean, it's just like this burning desire. And it wasn't because I had 6 cups of coffee. Okay. I mean, I just had this this fire, this passion, this hop in my step. And, just about every morning around 4 a.m. And, my wife loved this. 4 a.m. I'd wake up. She wasn't happy with me, right? I was tripping over the dog, turning on the lights, bumping my head on the door. And then, every morning, seriously, 4 a.m. And then I'd head down to my couch and, I'd start typing and typing more notes in this Word doc and all the stories and the verses that stood out to me in the Bible. So
I love that. And I'm going to go somewhere with this because did you have another job at the time? I mean, obviously you did. Well, as you wrote the book?
Yes.
Is that why you got up at 4? Yeah. So you work full time.
I do. So you do it in your white spaces, right?
See?
So this is the white spaces. And it's almost like I do this now too, I'm an early riser. Like I wake up at 5, okay. And I get so much done before it's 8, 9 o'clock before everybody else. So yeah.
Successful people do. And there's truth to that. And I just want to commend you, one, because my publisher, Jordan, he talks about this all the time. He says that 99% of books die with the author. Like everyone says, oh, I'm going to write a book one day. This will make a great story. I'm going to write a book one day. Everyone says it, but there's only that 1% that followed through, man. So I'm proud of you for doing that. And even it would have been easy because this is another, and I don't want to say excuse, I don't want to offend people, but I hope it inspires people watching out there. Even with another job, a full-time job, you got up at 4 a.m. because it meant that much to you to get it done. I love that.
Well, I'm proud of you too, Andy. I mean, it's a daunting task. It's not, the lighthearted person to get out there and try writing a book. I mean, another thing too, it's important for the audience to know this. I was never a writer. Okay. I had problems actually concentrating while I'm reading. So I was never a big reader.
Yeah.
And up to this point, I still never read the Bible.
Wow.
I mean, well, I read the Bible, but before that, I mean, I had no clue what I was doing.
Yeah.
So, but for whatever reason, I just kept writing for a year. Okay. For 1 year, almost every morning and into the wee hours of the night, I'm like, I got to get this book out. And I don't know how you felt, Andy, but I remember hearing somebody say this, but I don't know if it was a podcast I was listening to or not, but I heard them say, you don't want to die with your book in you. And that just kept resonating. I mean, in my head, don't want to die with your book in you. And that hit me hard. So I was on a mission from God to get this thing out. So
I love it. And another friend of mine, Dave Blanchard, always says that writers write. And so you actually did this. You're a living testimony to this. But he said, for me, he told me to block off because I wasn't a big structure guy. Believe it or not, I am now. So there is hope. If you're not a structure person, there is hope. But he told me to block off time from 8 a.m. to 12 because that's when I would take the girls to school, get them to school. And then from 8 to 12, I wrote. And I blocked that off unless there was an absolute emergency. Tiff knew I would be in my office writing, even because I used to wait till I felt inspired, right? I got to feel that inspirational time to write. And those are good moments. Sometimes it happens like that where you're just writing and it's just coming to you. But other times you're not always going to feel inspired. You got to do it anyways. You just got to go. And once you get into the group, kind of like working out, right? Sometimes you don't feel like going to the gym, but once you get there and you get loose and warm, sometimes those are the best workouts. That's what I found in writing. Was that a similar experience for you? Just every morning at 4 a.m., you set that time aside to dive into the book?
That's so funny. So I even, speaking about working out, that seems to be where these moments come from too. Like days I'll get where I'm just a mind block, and then I might be on a treadmill and you'll see me with my phone, like texting myself, like this idea I have or what I want to say. So yeah, you just got to find your time. When the time happens, you got to go, okay, I'm going to go sit down and actually write this stuff down. That's what I did too, is I took that Word document and I go, honey, I'm going to send this to a few Christian publishers. And a few weeks later, they both called me back and said they wanted to publish the book. And I'm like, who, me? Right? I mean, I was blown away. So
that's got to be a cool feeling. I want you to, for the listeners, can I dive in and press a couple buttons a little bit?
Yeah.
Can you explain what that felt like when you got that call? Who'd you tell? Obviously, maybe Paige first, but who was the first call? What'd you do after you got that call?
Gosh, you know what? I know this sounds weird, but I only told our kids and Paige, my
Yeah.
wife. I'm the kind of guy like I'm in sales, right? If this order is not really a PO and it's signed, then I'm
Yeah.
not going to say anything about it. So I was like, okay. I was still in shock. I didn't spread the word about it.
Well,
And now what I did learn, I mean, like I said, I'm not the best writer, but what I realized in this exercise is that I don't know how you felt during your book, but God gifted me with the ability to simplify things,
yeah.
kind of make things easier. And I'm like that in my job too, in my business. Just make things easier for people to understand, make it sweet and simple, which is why I named the book The Bible Simplified. And
Yeah.
it's a lot different than just a Bible for dummies or cliff notes from a scholar or pastor. It's just plain raw
Yeah.
interpretation of the Bible from a rookie Christian, right? Just a regular guy from the cornfields of Illinois who just never experienced the true meaning of the Bible and the love that God and Jesus has for us. And then
Wow.
reading the Bible was definitely the catalyst for making all this stuff happen, to get me that fire and that passion going. So
Well, I absolutely love this, man. And that makes me feel even better. I always love it. And I say this all the time. I'm not an expert. I'm just a dude that went through the trenches of depression. And now I'm trying to share what I learned along the way. And this sounds like the exact same thing you did with your book. Tell me the ending. So once it's done, once it's wrapped up, what has this book meant for you? And what's it meant to some of the people who've read it and responded to you and reached out to you since it's come out? I would love to hear that side.
well, I think when these things happen to you, that's kind of the unknown in the mystery of faith.
Yeah.
You just don't know what's going to happen and how he makes these miracles happen when you're least expecting it. And that's kind of how I live my life. I mean, doing my best to lead with love and lead with kindness and with open arms of how I can help others and plant seeds of hope so they too can experience, all the blessings that he has for them, like he's
Yeah.
done for me. So you just have to be aware and open to these opportunities. Then just get in the game, get off the bench,
Yeah.
get on the field. And I mean, that's where the magic happens, right? So
Just got to go for it. Do it scared, as you
absolutely.
said earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Man.
just encourage you. I don't know. I mean, I know you're like this too on your podcast, but I encourage you, to start paying more attention to those nudges. God's dripping these
Yeah.
nudges, opportunities in your life, a lot. And then just act on them without waiting. That's what happens with most of us is we just get these thoughts and these ideas, and then we're like,
Yeah.
hey, I'll get to this later on. And it's like, if I would have just acted on this could have changed somebody's life. You
Yeah.
could have like a massive breakthrough in not only your life, but somebody else's life too.
It's so good, bro. It is. You get the ideals for a reason. You get the dreams put in your heart for a reason. And I'm preaching to the choir. I'm preaching myself. But then acting on it, it takes more. It takes more than just the ideal. God didn't put that on your heart if he wanted you just to have a cool ideal and make it easier for you to fall asleep that night. He put that in your heart for a reason. But thank you for sharing all this today. And then before we go, man, there's some breaking news. So as I was talking to you a couple of weeks ago, I'm like, man, I want you to come talk about your book. And then you're like, well, I would love to. And oh, by the way, I am writing another book. So tell us a little bit about that. Obviously, I'm going to bring you back whenever it comes out, but I would love just to touch a tip on that. What's the new book about? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So as you know, my book is available like the Bible Simplifies on Amazon. It's at Barnes and Noble, all the other online stores. And it's interesting too. I want to share this with you. 100% of the profits from the sale of my Bible book. I mean, this book is not about me. I mean, it's going to go
Yeah.
to charities. So we're, breast cancer, childhood cancer, pets, vets, Alzheimer's Association, local churches, and it's going to continue to be that way forever. And
Wow.
actually, what I'd like to do too, Andy, is I know what you and Tiff have done going out to Africa, and you're looking for about 100 sponsors.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to use a portion of the profits of, my book to go
Dude,
to that community and being a sponsor to partner with you on a lot of that stuff too. So
Man, and this is, see, I told you people, this guy is one of the greatest dudes in the world. I love this guy so much. And thank you, Ken. And I'll get with you afterwards and we can talk about that. But thank you so much. But tell us about what's next, man. Tell us about the new
Yeah.
book.
What's next, right? That's always the biggest thing. What's
Yeah.
next? So the second book is launching in a few months. So it kind of, so you got the foundation,
Yeah.
the Bible, right? This book is called The Invitation. So
Wow.
it's about, these opportunities and, these invitations. I mean, even when you're in church and when you're listening to people too, you're going to hear them say, "Hey, I invite you," right? So
Yeah.
they're floating around us every day. I mean, it could be like a person we're supposed to meet, a job we should have taken, maybe that mission trip you went on, right? Or
Yeah.
or maybe a person you should have forgiven,
Mm,
a book you should have written, right?
yeah.
So
So many.
it's
Yeah.
it's just a matter of being more aware and open to these nudges and opportunities, and then grabbing onto them when they fly by us and saying yes more often.
Wow.
With Paige, if I didn't say yes to the invitation of her sister bringing me over to her house, I mean, the trajectory of my life would be so different,
Change your life, right? Wow.
right? Like it did for you,
Yes.
you and
These,
Tiff.
man, I'm
And
loving where you're going with this. And they seem sometimes like small decisions, but one choice can rapidly change a person's life. I love that. Well, is it done yet? The book? Are you still writing it, or when's it come out?
it's going into production probably in a couple weeks. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
In fact, I think you had just signed, if I'm right, the
I,
day I saw you, you're like, dude, I just signed a contract or finished it out. And so cool, man. So proud of you. And this all happened like in a time where most people were sitting on the couch eating Cheetos. It's like, let's just lock ourselves in. Let's not go forward. There's no hope. I love that, man. Sometimes in the most diverse, hard times, difficult times, I should have said, is when some of the most creative and beautiful people rise up and step up. And I love that. Man, congrats.
well, thank you, Andy. Right back at you too. I'm excited about what your book's going to do to breathe some hope and life and purpose into
Yeah.
people too. And these are the people who kind of feel like they're in the shadows and they
Yeah.
don't have anything to offer. I
Yeah.
mean, heck, if little old Kenny boy from the cornfields of Illinois with zero background in writing and having issues comprehended, if I can do this at the age of 52,
Yeah.
so that's another thing. It's like
Yeah.
whether you're 20 or 52 or 80, anything's possible. You
I
can do
love
it.
it.
Just got to listen to it. So I really appreciate you giving us all, really this platform to share our stories and this podcast. And
Man, I'm honored to do so. And you've already said where you can find the book, but how can someone find you social media wise or an email, or if they want to find out more about the book or they have any other kind of questions, how can they contact you, Kim?
email is the best way.
Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
email is the best way. Ken and Paige at gmail.com.
Okay. Awesome.
Absolutely. Would love to hear from
Well, absolutely. And real quick, I want to give you a chance to plug your wife. Works with, not with us, but she is also an independent Optavia coach. She's
you. Yeah.
helping a lot of people get healthy. Uh, Amazing story herself. If somebody's out there, they just stumbled on this podcast and maybe they need some help in their health, I know your wife could help them out. How can they get, is it the same email or is she's got a Facebook or social media? How can they get in touch with Paige?
Oh, thanks, Andy. Yeah, she's pumped. This is her purpose in life, right?
Yeah.
She found it. She wants to help and serve people. So I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, Ken and Paige at gmail.com. And yeah, she's got a Facebook page as well. Paige Ladendorf Wilson.
Awesome. And that's
Yeah,
Paige, right, Paige?
very good.
Awesome.
Paige.
Very cool. Well,
Yes.
Ken, thank you so much for your time, bro. And yes, a couple of months from now, you guys get ready. He's coming back. I already told him. So this is a twofer. It's not a one. We're gonna have you come out when the book's either close to coming out or maybe out. But we want to push the new book, The Invitation. I don't know. Is that the title or what's it? Or do you have a title yet?
That is the title, The Invitation.
That
Yep.
is so cool, so catchy, and I love the premise behind it. So we will have you back to tell us how that book's going. But thanks so
Awesome.
much for doing this, man.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate you.
All right, God bless, buddy.
God bless. Take care.
Wow, wasn't that so cool? Man, I love that dude. I love Ken Wilson. Mark it down. Just amazing guy. And I've known him for the last, I would say, at least 6 years, maybe 7 now. I'm trying to remember exactly the first time I met him. Maybe 5. Anywhere from 5 to 7 years. But I'm telling you, he's the real deal. And I had no idea his story, because he doesn't go around telling you, I had a pretty rough childhood. That dude, he just smiles. And that's funny. His new book's called The Invitation because his smile is so inviting and so welcoming. And he is consistently happy. That would be my description for Ken, is a happy guy. And so I am glad that you got to hear from him. So inspiring. And I hope that inspired you. And this podcast is always about hope and inspiration. And so please share this with somebody who is in need of hope today, who needs to hear Ken's story or needs to dive into the word. What an amazing book this is. The Bible Simplified by Ken Wilson. And you can get it pretty much anywhere. He's at Barnes and Nobles, Amazon. Check it out. But I would love for you to get that book. And also, if you haven't received my book yet, you hadn't got it yet, you can get it at andihoward.com. It's also available on Amazon. I will read it for you on Audible, or you can also get it through Kindle as well. Please, and this is my ask for the day, I'm going to be that guy. Please leave a 5-star review if it's been a blessing to you. If you have found this book, so many people keep coming up to me and telling me, oh man, I love your book. I'm so grateful for your book. It's flattering. It is so flattering for me. But the whole goal is to help people. That's the whole reason I fought through all the hard part to get it out there, and was so vulnerable with my story to get it out there, was to help people. Anyways, there is 100 people mark on the ratings. I don't know why on Amazon. That's like the special mark. If I can get 100 ratings, it unlocks the book to so many more people. And that's what this is about. It's a book about hope and about helping people. So if you would, please be so kind to go leave a nice review on the book or the podcast as well. That would help more people find it and more people find hope. Thanks again for joining. Can't wait to see you again. God bless.